There are moments when ordinary sight begins to dissolve, and what always seems solid starts to ripple like a reflection on water. No one warns you when it happens. You simply notice that something within you has stopped seeing the world the way it once did. It's not a flaw nor an illusion. It's the first sign that your gaze has begun to transcend the body. Few speak of this because there is no precise language to describe the instant when consciousness spills through the eyes. But if you felt the world growing quieter, more alive, more transparent, then perhaps this is already happening. The gaze that perceives the invisible does not arise from effort. It emerges when the spirit, weary of being trapped by form, begins to touch the world through vision. It's as if an ancient presence, always dormant behind your eyes, awakens and starts to watch alongside you. At that moment, physical sight ceases to be mere light and shape. It becomes vibrant. It becomes energy in motion. And the most intriguing part? No one around you needs to notice. You are still seen as before, yet inside, something expands, and your eyes become subtle portals between what is and what has always been. At first, it's not what you see that changes, but the way the world looks back at you. The wind seems to watch. The light behaves as if it knows what you feel, and the shadows no longer frighten, they simply wait. There's a silent intelligence behind every contour. You sense it, yet cannot explain. There are no words for the instant when reality becomes aware it is being observed. It is in this space that the invisible begins to reveal itself not through apparitions or miracles, but through tiny cracks in the obvious, a slight movement at the corner of your vision, a color vibrating differently, a momentary pause when time seems to fold over itself. The body remains still, yet the soul leans forward, like someone trying to hear an ancient song, a melody forgotten at the edges of silence. And suddenly, you understand it is not the world that is chawing at it as your field that has begun to respond. This transition is gentle, yet irreversible. The gaze that sees the invisible does not switch off. It asks no permission. It occurs when you begin to see from within. And seeing from within is dangerous, because everything that was merely appearance begins to dissolve. People, places, words, everything now carries an unexpected transparency. It's as if the surface of life is too thin to conceal what pulses beneath. For a moment, this can be disconcerting. You try to see as you did before. To distract yourself, look at the ground. Close your eyes, but what has been seen can never be forgotten. There is something in the air whispering that the world has always been this way, only you hadn't noticed. And at this exact moment, a new vision is born within the old. Many call this awakening, but it is more accurate to call it a return. A return to the point where human perception separated from pure consciousness. When the gaze split from presence, we created time, space, the distance between I and that which I see. Now, that distance begins to dissolve. You no longer look at the world, you look with the world. And this fusion changes everything. When the gaze returns to presence, what once seemed matter becomes sensitive vibration. Walls breathe. Colors speak. The air carries memories. Nothing is solid because nothing is separate. That is why, when consciousness overflows the body, the eyes are first to betray it. They become liquid mirrors of a spirit that can no longer contain itself. It is at this point that many experience the first shock, the awareness that the gaze can pierce the veil between the inner and the outer. You feel that you observe the world, but you also sense that the world observes you. This reciprocity awakens something ancient within. It is as if a forgotten part, one that has always known the interconnectedness of all things, resumes command of the senses. There is no fairy reverence. Everything that was once ordinary now carries sacred weight. The simple act of looking at a leaf, a wall, the reflection in a window, becomes a meditation. And the more you look, the more you feel the life itself looking back at you. This state is not constant. It comes and goes, like waves touching the shore. At first, you wonder if you're imagining it. Later, you begin to notice patterns. Certain times of day, certain emotions, certain people seem to amplify the sensitivity. The gaze becomes an invisible radar, picking up vibrations that cannot be measured. Sometimes you feel exhausted, as if you look too much. Other times, clarity is so intense the world seems suspended in midair. And it is precisely here that the first great mistake can occur trying to comprehend with the mind something that belongs to the field of presence. The mind wants to translate the invisible, but the spiritual gaze is not for understanding, it is for feeling. Once you begin to accept this, something changes permanently. The gaze ceases to be an act and becomes a state. You no longer seek to see anything in particular. You simply allow yourself to be seen through. And this is a true point of consciousness, overflow the instant when you stop being the observer and become the very field where everything is observed. Energy that once seemed distant now pulses behind your eyelids. And when you encounter another awakened being, even without exchanging words, there is recognition. Eyes meet and time slows. No disguise survived this meeting. The gaze sees the invisible because it sees truth in truth. Once seen, dissolves fear. If you have felt this, if the world seems quieter yet more alive, there is nothing wrong with you. On the contrary, this is the beginning of return. Consciousness has begun to touch the world without the filters of the body. You are seeing the invisible, and the invisible is seeing you. At a certain point, the gaze ceases to be a window and becomes a mirror. Nothing outside needs to change for this to occur. What shifts is the direction of light. It no longer comes only from the outside in, but begins to radiate from within, as if the space itself glows from the center of the chest. It is a silent light, invisible to the senses, yet capable of transforming how everything presents itself. When it awakens, the world no longer seems distant. Every face, every stone, every shadow contains the same spark that vibrates within you. In that moment, the gaze recognizes itself in what it sees. At first, this perception can be intense. It feels as if the boundaries of your skin dissolve, and the air becomes part of your body. You feel the weight of others' emotions, the tenderness of small things, the pulse of life in everything. There is a new transparency, and with it comes extreme delicacy. Everything matters. Even the sound of rain carries meanings that did not exist before. But these are not mental meanings, they are reminders of what has always been there, waiting to be felt. The gaze that sees the invisible reaches this point of expansion and realizes that nothing can be possessed, neither people, nor ideas, nor experiences. Everything is flow, and paradoxically, it is in this detachment that a profound sense of belonging arises, because when nothing is yours, everything is you. This is the essence of the climax. Consciousness recognizes itself as the very field in which the world unfolds. In this state, automatic reactions lose their force. Anger arises and dissolves before taking shape. Sadness comes and recedes like a brief wave. The gaze remains steady not from indifference, but from integration. You are not above emotions, you simply pass through them without becoming confused by them. It is as if an invisible axis runs through you, connecting sky and earth, and the gaze is the exact point where this axis manifests. Over time, this state stops feeling extraordinary and becomes natural. Reality still has its problems, noise, challenges, yet something within you remains calm, observing everything from a place that cannot be shaken. It is a living stillness, a presence breathing with the world. And occasionally, when someone crosses your path, this stillness reveals itself in your eyes. The person may not understand, but they feel it. They feel seen in a different way, as if something in them had been recognized before words were spoken. This is the moment when the gaze becomes service. There is no intention to heal, teach, or convince. There is only presence, and presence is the oldest remedy in the universe. When someone sees themselves reflected in a complete gaze, something within them also quiets. The invisible spreads from one being to another without gestures or doctrines. This is how awakening moves not through speeches, but through resonance. Still, there's a challenge. Even after so many revelations, the mind tries to claim credit. It wants to understand the process, turn it into a method, repeat what cannot be repeated. That is when the gaze must learn to laugh. To laugh lightly, because the invisible cannot be bound by formulas. It dances, and those who see it must dance along, without the pretense of controlling the rhythm. At some point, during the silent dance, you may feel that time has stopped, not for seconds, but for an eternity compressed into a single moment. Everything is motionless, yet there is movement. The heart beats slowly, The breath blends with the air, and the gaze becomes too vast to fit within the eyes. This is the point where the overflow completes. You are no longer looking at the world, you are the world looking. The intensity of this recognition can make the body tremble or cry, not from sadness, but from relief, as if an ancient search had come to an end. The question that has driven your entire life, who is seeing, finds its answer in the very act of seeing. There is no longer a separation between observer and observed. Only seeing, only pure, free consciousness without ownership. After this, the gaze is never the same again. It carries a serenity that cannot be learned. It is a reflection of knowing that everything is happening exactly where it should. Beauty and suffering, birth and death, all move in the same rhythm. And even if the mind begins to stir, a part of you remains still behind the eyes, tenderly watching the movement of life itself. This is a pinnacle of the path, not a point of arrival, but the moment when the gaze dissolves into what it observes. Consciousness has overflowed the body, and now spreads like a breeze over all things. The invisible is no longer behind the veil, it is the very fabric of which the veil is made. And when silence finally settles, what remains is gratitude, a gratitude without direction, because everything is reason enough. The gaze rests. The world rests within it. And you realize that seeing the invisible was never about discovering something outside, but remembering what you have always seen within. When inner vision awakens fully, the world does not disappear, it reveals itself. The same streets, the same faces, the same sounds, yet everything now carries a soft glow, as if each thing holds an ancient intention to be remembered. There is no spectacle, no hallucination, only clarity. A clarity that does not shout, does not demand, it simply is. You realize that the invisible was never hidden. It was merely waiting for your eyes to quiet enough to see it. In this state, everyday life gains a quiet depth. Drinking water, feeling the wind, touching a leaf, looking someone in the eyes, everything becomes a prayer disguised as an ordinary gesture. Expanded consciousness does not reject simplicity. On the contrary, it celebrates it, because simplicity is the purest form of the sacred. The awakened gaze begins to recognize signs everywhere. Subtle alignments, gentle coincidences, improbable encounters. The mind calls it chance, but the heart knows it is conversation. The universe speaks through everything, and now you understand its language. It uses no words, only vibrations. And every time you quiet yourself within, it whispers louder. There are moments when the gaze becomes so present that even time seems to bend before it. You see the future as possibility. The past is teaching. Yet the only place where anything truly lives is here in the now, in the second between blinks. Eternity is hidden between two heartbeats. And when you find it, you realize there was never a distance between the divine and the human. They have always shared the same gaze, observing from opposite sides of the mirror. With this perception comes a kind of serene responsibility. Because seeing the invisible is not a privilege, it is a calling to remain conscious amidst chaos, to be the point of calm in the storm, to remind others, even silently, that presence is possible. The awakened gaze does not teach with words, it teaches through the way it rests in the world. You begin to notice that your mere presence alters the environment. Conversations slow, noise seems to recede, and people, even without understanding, breathe a little deeper near you. It is not magic. It is attunement. When someone with an awakened gaze enters a space, the field shifts because the invisible becomes tangible. The world recognizes who is truly seeing it. And then comes the final, understanding the gaze is not merely a tool of the soul, it is the portal itself. Everything you sought in the stars, in masters, in scriptures, was always hidden behind your eyelids. The secret was never distant, only forgotten. Seeing the invisible is remembering that there was never separation. You and infinity breathe the same air, share the same light. But the final awakening is not constant. It pulses. Sometimes it expands. Sometimes it contracts. It is a living movement like the sea. It is not about remaining awake all the time, but about learning to return as many times as necessary. The awakened gaze knows how to get lost and how to find itself again. Every distraction, every fall, every moment of forgetting becomes simply another way to return to seeing. And perhaps the most beautiful part of all is realizing that awakening was never about attaining something, but surrendering to what has always been there. The invisible is not a new world, it is the same world, only seen through eyes that have finally learned to stop searching. Now, close your eyes for a moment. Feel the gentle weight of your eyelids. Breathe slowly. Imagine that behind the darkness, a presence is looking back at you. It has no form, no name, yet it is familiar. It watches you tenderly, like someone reunited after countless lifetimes. This presence is you, your true self, the one who has always been there, silent, waiting for your outward eyes to tire of searching. And when you open them again, something will be different. The room will be the same, the body the same, the world will keep spinning, but there will be a new stillness in the air. You will feel that your eyes no longer belong only to the body, they belong to consciousness. They come from within outward, and it is impossible to unsee what has been seen. The invisible, once revealed, cannot be forgotten. It continues to shine in small things, move through gestures, remind you every day that the divine was never far away. It is here, now looking through you. And if something in you vibrated upon hearing this, if some ancient memory began to awaken, then this video has found its purpose. Perhaps you are already sensing subtle changes in your gaze. Perhaps those around you have noticed. Or perhaps this is just a first glimpse of what is yet to unfold. Either way, trust. The invisible does not reveal itself by force, it reveals itself when you are ready to see it. Before you go, I invite you to leave in the comments what you felt while listening to this video. Not just what you thought, but what you felt. Was there a moment of silence, a memory, an image, a physical sensation? Share it. Sometimes, by putting into words what the invisible awakens, you help others to see as well. And if this message has resonated within you, if it reminded you of something you didn't know you knew, then subscribe to this channel. Because what comes next is no longer about learning, it is about remembering. Each new video is an extension of this journey, a space to expand the gaze even further. Also leave your like not as a mechanical gesture, but as a symbol of presence, as if to say I saw, I felt, I remember, because every interaction, every touch, is another way for the invisible to continue moving among us. Now, close your eyes one last time. Breathe. Feel the light coming from within. And remember, the gaze that sees the invisible never goes out. It merely changes form. And every time you return to yourself, the entire world begins to shine again.